On September 22nd, 1964, Fiddler on the Roof opened on Broadway. Composer Jerry Bock and lyricist Sheldon Harnick are here today to tell us about their hit show on the American Musical Theater.
We should introduce ourselves.
In place of your usual glamorous host, you have two frightened writers today. This is Sheldon Harnick, who wrote the lyrics to Fiddler on the Roof.
And this is Jerry Bock, who wrote the music to Fiddler on the Roof. And conducting the orchestra today was Milton Green, who conducts the orchestra at the Imperial for us every night.
And we're going to have a thrill by being able to sing with him for the first time sometime tonight, hopefully, if he's willing.
We were very pleased to be asked to talk about the evolution and the background of our show, Fiddler on the Roof. There are certain things that we have prepared to talk about which we think are fairly interesting, and we hope you have questions as to what you think may be fairly interesting.
If you don't, we'll be over in 10 minutes, so please have questions.
Gentlemen, who chose the material for Fiddler on the Roof? And also, I'd like to know, what made you think that Tevye's Daughters would make a good musical?
Hi.
Now you know who chose the material.
I heard she could have read that a different way. And what made you think?
I think to answer your second question first is simply to say that we loved the material, and that's why we wanted to write it. Whether or not it would be successful, of course, we try to equate our love with the fact that other people will love it as well. But I must say the history of the show has been one in which the show was not thought of as a highly commercial notion, and that people went through transformations and changes. People who at first didn't think it might work at all changed their mind. I'm talking about people before the show opened as well. I don't think you ever know when you start something that it's going to be successful. There's no guarantee, but you should know that you're willing to spend at least a year, in this case, I guess 3.
At least 3 years in this case.
Working on it.
You have to love it. And these particular stories are beautiful stories, and when we read them, one of the important things was that as we read them, we saw where we would like to treat them musically. As far as who suggested it, I truly don't remember. I know about 3 or 4 years ago, we read a novel of Sholem Aleichem's called Wandering Star, and felt that this wasn't right as a musical, but it cued us to look for other things by Sholem Aleichem.
We went to our author, Joe Stein, who suggested that we read the short stories, Tevye's Daughters and other short stories. And we really became so involved with the characters of this writer and knew that it would be something we'd want to work on very badly. And so we did. Any other questions? Yes.
Who was Sholem Aleichem, and what were his stories about?
Well, Sholem Aleichem was a writer, just in case you didn't know. And he lived towards the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th. He was born, I believe, in Kiev, in Russia, and eventually he wound up in Brooklyn. And he died in 1916. I think he's buried in Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken. And Sholem Aleichem wrote stories in Yiddish for a Yiddish-speaking and a Yiddish-reading audience. He was one of the first great writers to take Yiddish and make it a literary language. He made it a language which had a style. Up till then, it had been considered kind of a vulgar language. People just didn't write in it. But he wrote in it. He wrote beautifully. And he wrote about the people and the events that he knew and that he was part of in Russia and Russian Poland around the turn of the century and earlier.
Yes.
Yes.
Wasn't this kind of story a sort of way-out choice for musical? And if so, how did you find a backer?
If so, how did we...
If it was so way out, how did you find backers?
Well, it was way out in one sense, I guess, that it seems like a very special milieu that the stories are about. But once we had chosen it, we found to our delight that there were many people who knew the stories of Sholem Aleichem better than we did, and who were delighted that somebody was going to take this and make a musical out of it, and they couldn't wait to back it.
There was the feeling, the skeptical feeling, that this might not be a universal show, if any show can be termed universal, appealing to almost everybody. But this show, more than others, might be specifically designed for just a certain group of people. And we had this in mind without destroying any of the authenticity or the folklore, the color of the show. We didn't want to limit